Hi there, I'm your host Clive Serkin, and welcome to the Unstuck podcast, where we're on a journey to help you get control of your work environment, get yourself unstuck, and perform to your full potential. Right, so today we have Simon Francis joining us on this week's episode of Unstuck. Simon is the CEO of Flock Associates. It's a marketing transformation company, and we'll talk about that in a moment. And as a consequence, perfectly suited to talk about our topic of Unstuck, because essentially Flock is all about either getting companies unstuck or helping them avoid getting stuck in the first place. So Simon, welcome. Thanks for making the time to talk.
Hi, great to see you.
So, you've had an extraordinary career, which is sort of code language for you're an old lad like me, but you've had an extraordinary career. I've known you for most of your career. 30 years in the agency, give or take, in the agency world, starting at Zenith, if I remember, and you went through the ranks and ultimately served as the CEO of Saatchi, CEO of Dentsu, CEO of Aegis. So you've had an incredible career and a really good look at the industry. Talk to me about how you navigated your career, how you stayed fresh, and how you accomplished sort of that kind of success, not just in terms of the titles and the position, but sort of the impact that you've had, which I know firsthand has been pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to reflect on it and have the time to reflect on it in a way, right? Because it's flown by. 30 years feels like 3 years. And I guess it's a series of happy accidents and some sort of spontaneous planning, I think is the truth of it. I got into the industry because I needed to get a job before what I thought were going to be terrible degree results came out. So like many people in marketing and advertising, I didn't train for it, I fell into it. My biology degree and specialism in echolocation and whales and dolphins did not equip me.
Perfect.
Yeah,
That's
did not
perfect.
equip me to be a press buyer in Zenith in the days, right? So let's be frank, that was an accident. But I got my head down, I worked hard, and what I loved about the industry, it was meritocratic. Someone thought I was good enough, and they promoted me very, very quickly. And then I was interested in stuff that was new and different and the edges. And so just as communications planning came into Zenith, and Zenith was very new, this was the first big media agency really that had set up. Planning came in, and I volunteered and was sponsored into a new role, right? So I was on the edges, and I think that will typify the rest of the story. I hunt the edges. I look for the edges. I'm interested in what's on the horizon or on the edge of the horizon, and hunt that down. And so I think that's typified things. The other thing is I'm a sucker for fixing things, and there were some roles which I've taken which perhaps others wouldn't have done. They would have been too much of a challenge. So OMD was called OMD Europe. Part of the Omnicom group was called Optimum Media No Direction for a long while, and I won a lot of business from it. And then I was hired to run it from a strategic sort of sense. And a lot of people probably wouldn't have touched that. And then again, another shift to Saatchi, which perhaps wasn't in its best state when I took a role to turn it sort of around. So I think they would be the two typifiers. Don't be afraid to take on a challenge to turn things around. You learn more from a challenge than something that's on the crest of a wave. And the other is hunt the edges assiduously. It keeps you so fresh and young and interesting and exciting.
Well, hunt the edges, which I love that term, is a consistent theme. You just use different language for it, which I love. But as I've talked to guests on the show, they all give a same version of it, which is like, don't take the path less trodden. Did we joke about the biology degree because I know you did that in the whales, which is kind of cool. But do you think that sort of impacted how you thought about your career? Because you didn't come in with the conventional thinking in the career. You didn't do the traditional degree. So hunting the edges says don't think about it in the conventional sense. Is there any connection there? I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, I think it was a bit of naivety, and I think it's a bit of self-belief. I think, and then when you find yourself in these situations, having enough vanity to not want to fail. Do you know what I mean? I hate losing, right? So if you find yourself in a situation you don't want to come second, and you're in a place that's an edge, then you just dig. You just dig, and so I think that would probably post-rationalize some of it, but I think that would be sort of true. But I do think that hunting the edge or taking the path less trodden is so smart. For any brand, you can look at the center of a target audience, for example, and look in the middle of the bell curve, and it tells you nothing interesting. When you get to the edges of any data set, you look at any edges of the different target audiences, or you look at different markets around the world, which may not be typical, you find something smart and something you can build from that's new and different from everyone else. And so I think that's probably why I stood out versus people that are far, far cleverer than me. It was just the fact that I was in a minority set with a bit of grain of knowledge that others didn't have.
I think it's key. Let's talk. I said when I introduced you, we talk about Flock, and talk about what do you mean by it being a marketing transformation company? What does that mean? Where are you transforming? Because that's a big territory, and I'd love to
Yeah.
get a sense of what you're doing out there, and then off then we'll talk about what you're seeing.
Yeah. Well, over, I don't know, probably 22 years of my life, I worked with multiple clients. The benefit of living in an agency is, you work with lots and lots of different clients. And so you've got this broad level of experience. And what I realized that over a period of time, companies were sort of succeeding either because they had brilliant strategy. What's my idea? What's my execution? What's my, creative, all of the what. Or they were fantastic at the how. How do I organize? How do I make this happen? How do I get my teams to work together? How do I get my agencies to work together? But then increasingly there was a shift. Lots of companies were getting unstuck because they just couldn't do the how. The world got more complicated real quick, right? Everything went globalized. Hundreds more different departments and specialisms attracted hundreds more different agencies. And so we work with clients now that have 1,500 agencies. So how do you build that coherently to get a message out to a consumer that is now in a niche? So the how has become radically more important than the what in some instances, right? I mean, I love the creative and stuff like that, but if no one sees it or they see it in a disjointed way, it counts for naught. So that was the inception of the company, which was to fix companies on the how, right? With the masters of the how, compulsive fixers of organization design. So what are the skills we need? How do we organize them? How do we train them? How do we motivate them? Second piece is marketing processes. Who does what to who, where, when, and how, and with what benefit, and how do you measure it? Then there's the agency ecosystem, the left hand to the right hand of the internal team. Which agencies, what's the shape of them, how are they organized, remunerated, appraised, and again, sort of motivated to work. And then there's the sort of the all important part, which is, the technology and the data increasing. That's the glue. If you see it as the glue between those parts, that's probably the best description. So that's the company that we formed, and we're looking to transform the output, the better work, by transforming the how. That would be the shorthand way of saying it.
Makes sense. And as you think about that and look over the past sort of, I don't know, 10 years, and what are there common threads in terms of the trends that you're seeing? And has that changed in
Yes.
the past 2.5, 3 years in this COVID world?
Yes, I think you could have seen the things coming, but of course, COVID has accelerated some of these trends and stopped others stone dead in their sort of tracks. I think that the things that you would typically see is the skill sets for your average marketer have changed. The rebalancing of the brain between left and right is in sharp focus with all of the data and the analytics that's available and can be galvanized. But to be melded with the brilliant creative brain is a remix for me on the skills side of things. On the more operational process side of things, I remember when we started, people talked about agile. It was normally an excuse for, can you just do the old processes a bit quicker or a bit cheaper? Now we're really, really embracing agile, and Flock is a metaphor for a tumbling swarm of birds. And we as a company embody the true sense of agile work, and to be able to bring this to marketing organizations, that agility is new and is accelerated, and COVID and working from homes as we've done has accelerated that. So that'll be the second sort of major trend that I think we've seen. It's hard to ignore the explosion in content, like millions of pieces of content, as opposed to slavishly laboring over that sort of 60-second sort of can buster that used to happen. That is a noticeable change to everything. And then the media ecosystem. was happy to start that trend. I founded, one of the founding starters up at Mindshare sort of stuff. So to see where it's gotten is genuinely extremely weird, that it's become so different from some of the other marketing disciplines, but yet so essential to all of those other marketing disciplines. So a whole series of different trends, and I mean them as trends. I don't mean fads like an NFT or something else which will come along.
Yeah.
I mean genuinely seismic changes to the industry, which ain't going backwards. That's for sure.
And it's like I want to get into my pet peeve in a second, but one of the things, or as a lead up to that, is one of the things that I experienced and sort of most illustrated when digital showed up is companies tend to see something coming and then they create a department for it or a line
Mm.
item for it, as opposed to step back and think about how does this change things. So I used to go nuts when people used the term digital marketing, because what it meant was I'm going to put a little budget aside for this thing called digital marketing, get some digital marketers, create a digital marketing group, and then have them go out do random acts of digital so I could say we were doing digital. And that used to drive me nuts. Are you still seeing that, or do you think that companies are understanding that uh, it, it's transforming how you think, and therefore you got to go to a blank sheet of paper in a sense and rebuild around it? I mean, in that instance, we live in a digital world. We build brands in a digital world. We don't do digital marketing. That
Yeah,
presumes,
yeah,
therefore, and legitimizes, therefore, we have analog marketing, right?
yeah. I mean, listen, I might have to go and blow in a paper bag because your peeve is my peeve. And so, listen, many people set up new departments or they hire a new agency to look at a new topic, right? And that for me is an admission of defeat. It means is that we don't have the skills and the capabilities at the moment, so we have to create something sort of separate for it. Or my current and established agency long-term partner can't do it. Why would you not work with them to get the right skills and to make sure you're doing it? Why would you not train and educate or have a learning and capabilities department that allows you to understand these new things and to put it across the organization? All that I genuinely see is I then make a lot of money in 6 months, 6 years' time, re-engineering departments to get them to reintegrate. The world is too complicated to have 1,000 departments. A department for NFTs, a department for social e-commerce. It just gets harder and harder to integrate when the consumer is looking for better and better customer experience. So I would broadly concur. Counter to that, I would say, is there are times when you have to get an acceleration, and having an agent for change is useful. And it could be an internal person or team or an external agency or team. And I think then to catalyze the overall organization is important. But if it's stuck on the outside, it can be a mess.
Well, and let me just stipulate, I'm 100% cool with that. Like, but if that's the state objective, like, let's create this little speedboat, and we're going to call it a speedboat, and its role is to be a speedboat, so we can sort of accelerate learning there, and that's cool. But then, but my dear is don't do that and call it something else, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I think classically in marketing departments, if you can get away from independent budgets and independent egos, you get a better customer experience and a customer journey as a result. And I'm fearful that some of these things are either ego driven or budget. Someone's got hold of a budget, therefore they must spend it, rather than looking through the eyes of the consumer and where you need to be in 3 years' time, which would be our long term customer led style of sort of transformation. The analogy I'd use is your Christmas tree, right, Clive? When you moved into your first flat all those 160 years ago, you would have got your first Christmas tree, and you'd have
Yep.
put on a beautiful array of ornaments, right? It would have just looked great. And then you have kids, and they bring some tack back from school, and you stick them on, and then you get some stuff free from work, and you stick it on, and suddenly, in about 5 years' time, your Christmas tree looks awful, right? And that's what's happening with many marketing departments and agency rosters. They've just gathered an assortment of different things, and every now and again you'll need to reshape that and get it back to the immaculate sort of design that you had in your mind when you started. And that's really what a lot of the work that Flock does: redesigning ecosystems, redesigning global marketing organization designs and processes where these bits have been inadvertently stuck on.
But
Marketeers
so,
are great at adding things. They're terrible minimalists. They're terrible at taking things away. And sometimes our role is to strip things back to their core purpose.
and you just open a door that I'm going to have to run through because I got two topics to that way. So I I have this thing about the re-industry, right? It's like re-engineering, reorganizing, re, and unfortunately, more often than not, at least from my vantage point, and I might be wrong, but it's like super painful, big budget, disruptive to the organization, and I'm sort of kind of cool with that if the outcome is a sustained better outcome, right? Too often you do these massive re-exercises, come out the other side, spend a ton of money, lost a lot of people, burn people, um, and 2 or 3 years later, people like you get the phone call saying, "Can you come help fix the same problem?" Why does that happen?
I have to say, I'm going to lay the blame in a couple of places, right? And
Yeah,
I will call it out. The first, I think, is people don't understand continuous improvement well enough. If you continuous improvement, you don't re anything. Well, you do, but you're just doing it on a smaller basis more often, but with a singular purpose. So your purpose is what does my consumer need in 3 years' time? Doesn't change. You're just reinterpreting it every month, every quarter, every year, and it stops these massive boom and bust sort of things. If you can build that in and hold your organization design and purpose and processes and agency rosters to it, right? It needs strong governance for sure. And it's helpful when you're able to contain your quarterly P&L to an extent that you don't have massive judders throughout the system driven by share price and stuff, admitted.
yep,
But the second thing I would say is there's a certain breed of management consultant, um, which I don't subscribe to, who are there to make fees, will overpromise and underdeliver, and love the big global reorganization that touches every crevice of the organization without necessarily having to live with the implications of it and not being accountable for the results of it, such as the executives in the company are. And one of our best sources of new business is sweeping in to fix marketing teams after a generalist has gone in and done a general reorg or something and forgotten to do the processes or forgotten that they haven't changed all of the agency roster. So we had 1,500 agencies were effectively less leaderless because a management consultant had taken out the teams and the skills that ran 1,500 agencies. So
incredible.
that's what I'm saying. I would honestly say there's a little bit of that, and
Oh,
sometimes with the CEO vanity, I'm going to go really quick. I'm going to hire someone, smash everything up, but I'm only going to be here for 2 years anyway. But I've added a bit to the share price or something. So
and how much?
cynical, but that's my view, my take.
No, listen, I've seen it. As part of how much of it is not getting really clear of what root cause is, and so therefore not attacking root cause, and sort of connected to that, what I'd heard this term a long time ago, non-rational escalation of commitment, which is all of a sudden the energy is on the reorg and you forget, or you didn't even do the real granular understanding of what are you actually solving? Like,
Mm.
what's the root cause of the problem that's causing the pain? And so then you got these
Yeah,
massive PMOs set up and everything, and it's all about the reorg. And no one's, well, why are we doing it? Does is this
yeah.
solving whatever it is we're supposed to solve?
Well, I think that's it. I think too many people look at where they are now, do deep analysis on the problems of where they are now. They may go backwards and look at why they've got there, but they then try and fix the now. Whereas any organization should try and fix the future. And that's why I always say 3 years out, what is it that your consumer needs? Otherwise, you get sucked into the internal politics, the reasons why, and all of that sort of stuff. If you use the consumer's view and what they need as a sharp edged tool for transformation, everything goes through that lens. Right? If it doesn't make sense to the consumer, take it away, get rid of it. Or if it is making sense, double it. So I don't know if you've seen, there's a wonderful piece about Picasso and the lion, where a journalist goes to Picasso and he's just carved this incredible lion and says to him, that's an amazing lion. Did you look in deep into the rock and, did you figure out what it was going to be and how did you do it? Picasso took a long draw on his cigarette and just said, no, I just took away everything that didn't look like a lion. And I think that's absolutely right. If you look at what you need in 3 years' time, that's a gap to the future. Now take away everything that isn't working for that, and make sure you can deliver on what you need. Doing a deep analysis of what went wrong 5 years ago isn't going to help you to the future. And with things changing so fast, I'm passionate that we have to look further ahead, because you're always going to slump back a little bit, right? I think that's the nature of change. And so if you don't get further enough ahead, you've not gone forwards at all. And I think that's why so many fail, sadly, because they're not just different enough, or they're not future facing enough, or they don't meet the needs of the consumer, so you don't get a different result.
Totally. Um, just somewhat connected, but you mentioned early on. I hope I got your words right, but essentially you're saying marketeers, and I would say humans are great at additive. And at Green Dragon, we're in the business of reduction, being reductionist, right? Which is our whole business is about eliminating work. Our whole business is about making humans spend more time, or helping humans spend more time on impact and output versus managing the beast. And you painted that picture of just adding more stuff. We find ourselves with a lot of clients where we walk in and they got like 6 or 7 different platforms. They've sort of MacGyvered it together and duct taped it together. And they spend more time managing the process than actually working on the outcome, which is like a horrific waste of resource, time, and energy, but it's super destructive to the humans. And how does is why does that happen? How do you get people to sort of pause and reflect and step back and go, we've got to fix this?
Yeah, no, it's a really great point. And as I say, there's the what and the how. We want to liberate as much time and energy and money to spend on the what. That's our purpose as a marketing transformation consultancy. And as I said, it's because it's gotten so complicated. It's more important, in many ways, is the how, but it's very wasteful, right? And so we absolutely zero in on that. And the power of technology to eliminate manual tasks, to eliminate stress, to streamline things, to give you great insight at a tenth of the speed that hundreds of researchers might do it, is unparalleled if harnessed well. And I think that's the thing I would say, certainly in the marketing area. I think marketing technology has crept up on marketeers over 30 years, right? A lot of people have been in denial. A lot of CMOs got to the top of their list having not really been technologists, and then living in an age of technology. Um, Very few marketeers have actually got genuine marketing technologist skills or functions or roles, maybe in marketing ops and some other areas in digital, like you say, they do that funny bit. Um, but that's a core part of almost every design we do, sort of now, to harness the power of technology to save drudgery and to liberate insight and ideas.
Absolutely. I mean, because ultimately, as a leader, I would think, I fervently believe this. The job of a leader is to close the gap between potential and impact in the humans in your organization. Like, you hire people with extraordinary and unlimited potential, and then inadvertently, hopefully for the most part, um, you place these obstacles in the way of their ability to fulfill their full potential and create the kind of impact you want.
Yeah.
It sounds a little,
No, it's
you
absolutely
know,
true though. I mean, and that's the purpose. One of our, key consulting tools is, of course, we'll interview people to understand the pain points and understand the opportunities, but we'll also do big quant work on what volume of time they're spending on things and what's the value of time. And the misalignment between the volume of time in a huge global marketing organization versus what they see as the valuable use of time is staggering. Okay. We had one organization that we did recently, they were spending 42% of time in sort of standard status meetings and ongoing reporting and just liaison and alignment. And yet they rank that obviously as the lowest use of their time versus all of the other value creation opportunities that they had as a marketing team. So 42% of human capital wasted. And that's also why people leave organizations. I'm sure you've seen the stats. 12% leave of money, 80% people leave because they, are not feeling loved, and they're not feeling valued within their organisation. Second piece after that category is that they can't do their work because they don't have the freedom and the ability to do it. So technologies, whether it's Green Dragon or others, liberate that time, build happy, sticky, productive staff for sure.
yep. I mean, that's, yeah, we spend a lot of time, and it's it's heartbreaking actually to talk to talent that feel just broken down and burned out and unfulfilled because they're mired in this horrendous process.
Yeah, I spoke to the ANA, the obviously Association of National
Yep.
Advertisers, sort of yesterday, and I quoted some of the stats for them. Is you've got some holding companies at the moment that are 40% churn. Okay, 40% of their staff are churning, and in some disciplines it's higher than that. Some post-COVID, but that's a massive drain on the industry that's leaving it. Now, I'm not saying technology is going to solve all of those sort of things, but it's certainly a component part to liberate thinking and creativity along with the processes and the structures and learning and development. And sort of culture is the other thing, which often gets overlooked in conversations like this. You talk about how to unstuck a organization or how to remove the barriers. Culture is the biggest driver of success or failure of any change, and the biggest motivator for many people to join a company and to stay if you can create that culture. Hardest one of all of those things. Like fix your tech takes time and energy to
Yep.
transform culture, and that's the biggest driver.
We're running out of time. Maybe two quickies before I ask you a final question is, and this may be a door we open up and sort of come back to it for another entire podcast because this is a big topic. But you talked about agencies and clients and resetting their roster, and um, one of my concerns for the industry, having spent half my career on the agency side, is the amount of pitches that going on in the sort of visceral knee jerk response that let's pitch to the business. Um, and I'm not saying that that's not a move that one should make, but I come from the school that says sit down with the team you have and figure out your problems once you're clear on what the problem is, and put the teams together with the agencies you have. But at least do that first, because there's no pitches are sort of like shows, right? Um, you ultimately have to build a long-term relationship. And the concern that I have with pitches is it's incredibly disruptive. It's time-consuming, and ultimately becomes a race to the bottom in terms of pricing, which hurts the margins of agencies, which drives incredible talent out of the industry, which ultimately materially impacts the very clients who are trying to get better outcomes. And I worry that there's a bit of
Yeah.
a codependency going, and that's driving the industry to the bottom, and it's not good for anyone.
Yeah, so some of our work is pitching, okay, but we're the
Yeah,
biggest advocates for not pitching you'll ever find, right? So we run agency appraisal services, okay, which are very different from perhaps some that some people sort of do, designed to prevent any pitch. So we're asking future-facing questions. So if a client doesn't think they're performing well or they can see a coming problem, then you get an early warning sort of on it, so you're able to fix it. We run get fit sessions, so if a relationship's broken down or if there's been a problem, we're an independent, safe place for everyone to go to do that sort of counselling to get it right and build fantastic action plans. Because I've lived a long time and we've worked with hundreds of agencies to build these get fit plans. We bring a lot of outside sort of in. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I would say the pitches that used to be, the word pitches were like siege warfare. Do you know what I mean? It was like the
yeah.
First World War in the Somme, right? Lobbing grenades and PowerPoint at one another. There's no reason for that. You can work in an agile way, as we've just said. You can give someone a short pilot sort of stuff like that to understand, but with the full transparency with other partners that they're not at risk. It's not a jeopardy. You know that there's things that you want to understand. Or when you do, if you absolutely have to, and you've expended all of those other options, have to run a pitch. It's very different agile ways of doing it rather than just going into who's got the prettiest PowerPoint and who can do the hottest sizzle tape, right? And I think that's where we run these very human pitches, where we set up one-on-one meetings with people so they can really understand them as people and how they think and they work. Because agencies are a collection of raw talent and humans, um, and really get to see that super sexy looking tool that you just had on PowerPoint for 10 minutes at the end of the presentation, getting your hands on it, working through it. So very different ways of pitching. So agree, pitching's bad for everyone. You can get around the pitching, you can avoid it with many good techniques and skills if you're disciplined and you're good enough as a marketeer. If you've gone to pitch, it means you're not a good enough client, right? It's not that the agency's all bad, and I think a lot of people forget that. And then the last thing, if you do have to pitch for whatever the reason might be, There are very different ways of doing it to get a different outcome, Clive.
Right. And again, I'm not saying that it's not a tool that you would use. It's just my concern is many situations the parties have not gone through the reps that you just described. I think that's a whole other 30-minute, 1 hour discussion because it's big territory. I'm quite passionate about it because I think it's hurting everyone the way it's happening now, and it's a dangerous sort of trajectory in my view. We're running out of time. Last question. What do you do to spring clean your brain? How do you keep fresh? Because to have a career as long as yours and to be still running at the pace you're running, which I know is pretty intense, you gotta recharge. What are you doing? What's the secret?
Yeah, it's fascinating. I would dread to see what the inside of my brain actually looked like. Some horrible assortment and an untidy morass of wiring and art and boxes and all sorts of stuff in there. So I'd say two things. One, I think it's absolutely essential to turn off sometimes, and I go fly fishing. It's the only thing that I know that turns my brain completely off, and I can think of nothing else apart from trout and flies and water. So that's my go-to for doing nothing. The second is rest. I've learned slowly and painfully that I function far, far well when I'm well rested. So now I use sleep apps and any other device to allow me to get the sleep that I would like. And the third thing is I'm still pushing those edges, but maybe just outside of the industry. I love looking at art. I love looking at antiques. I go off to different things. And I get as many ideas for marketing organization structures by not looking at them as I do by looking at them.
Brilliant. Ladies and gentlemen, Simon Francis, CEO of Flock Associates. Beautiful man, great brain, and good mate. Thanks, sir. Appreciate you being with us.
Thank you so much, Clive.
This podcast was brought to you by Screen Dragon. We break down barriers, make work flow, and unlock talent. Visit screendragon.com to see our software in action.